Hello and welcome back to video 4 in this mixing emo series where we go through everything that went into this mix and mastering. This video we'll be looking at the guitars. If you want to look at how the bass and drums were mixed, then go back to videos 1, 2 and 3, which I'll link to in the description. Okay, so let's get on with this. Let's see where we are so far with this mix. Let's listen to the chorus. And just quickly, like I've mentioned in the other videos, if you make music like this, emo, pop punk, or even metal, and you'd like me to mix your next song, then head over to terrybeckleyrecording.com, fill out the contact form, say hey, just say hey, and I will get back to you. Or you can just email me directly at contact@terrybeckleyrecording.com. I'll put both of those links in the description. Okay, let's get back to it. Cool, so most of this guitar mix is obviously from the tone. If you want to see what amp sim plugins and cabinet IRs I use to get these tones, and stick around to the end, I'll show them there. But for now, let's get into the actual mixing of the guitars. So on here, you've got the two plugins, which are the amp and the cab. So let's look at the first EQ here, which is a Pro Q3, doing some pretty important but simple stuff. So this little notch at 60 Hertz is making room for the kick. If you watched the kick video, or the first video, which was the kick and snare, we found that the fundamental of the kick was 60 Hertz. So this would have swallowed that up. So to make sure you can get that low end of the kick coming through, even when the whole mix is in, this is another important move, and you would have seen as well from the last video that we did it with the bass. So a slight bump here at 112 Hertz, that's where the low end of the guitars would be, so it gives it a bit more weight. And this would be a little bit of mud, and the dynamic part here will be for when the chugs are happening to keep the guitar tone from falling apart and the mix from falling apart with that big boost in 200 Hertz that those palm mutes give you. And then here, 786 Hertz, this will be some honk from the mids. So I'll go through each one of these as they're quite important. So let's hear the guitars in solo, and I will solo each of these bands. You can hear with the 60 Hertz, it's just rumble. You don't need that. You're getting that, it's just going to eat up all that kick and bass that you want, and you worked hard to craft in the earlier parts of your mix. So here, 112 Hertz, this will be around the low end of the guitars, and this is a very important frequency to give that weight that you want. You don't want the guitars to be too thin, especially when you add the brightness, which will be coming in a few plugins' time. See, the difference between that and the 60 Hertz, you can hear that's rumble, but there's no note there. There's actually guitar information that you want. So boosting, that's cool. So we remove the rumbly mud here at 60 Hertz and boost it there, getting the low end of the guitars up, but without eating up the low end instruments. Okay, 238 Hertz, this will be mud. Let's have a listen to this. Sounds like a windy hallway. Don't really need that. And yeah, the dynamic bit here to tame those chugs. And then here we go, we've got a mid cut. This will be a honky sound. So getting rid of that will allow you to keep the mids in the guitars, so you've got the actual notes coming through and you can hear the guitars properly in the mix. They won't sound too scooped, but also bring the guitars into focus and stop those mids from eating up the good bits. Let's have a listen to that frequency. I'm going to turn this frequency off and on so you can see why it's important to make this kind of cut. It's subtle, but it's very important, because when you pull that out, you get more low end, you get more top end, and it sort of brings the guitar into focus. It sounds blurry. It's the only way I can sort of describe it with when that cut's bypassed. So pretty important. Allows you to get nice sounding mids. Okay, then we've got a C4 doing the old sneap trick here, which again, this will only really be active when the guitar palm mutes are happening. It's and it'll bring them down to stop the mix from sort of falling apart. And we've got a CLA 3A from Waves. This is a cool compressor for guitar. It's more of a vibe thing. It'll bring the guitars forward and give you a little bit of like free width that you haven't had to work too hard for. It won't really be doing much dynamic control, because after the amp and stuff, there's not much dynamics in guitars. And there'll be the tiniest bit of gain boost, but I will have gain matched it as much as I wanted to. So let's hear this off and on, because this is a pretty cool plugin. Yeah, bit of width, bit of presence, bit of vibe, not a big bump in gain. Okay, so now we have an SSLE channel doing this is where the brightness of the guitars comes from. I always feel like, I don't know if it's my room, mixed with my headphones or what, but my guitars were coming out dull every time. So I try to, what sounds to me in solo is overly bright. And then when it goes into the mix, I get that sort of edge and bite that helps it compete with my favorite songs in the genre. I always felt like it was sounding soft in the past. Being able to go brighter than I naturally would actually really helped my mixes for this kind of music. So let's hear this off and on again. So you hear how bright that is? Every instinct in me would always be going, too bright, darken it, darken it. But when you keep referencing, which is such an important thing to do, you'll realize just how bright and edgy the guitars in this genre are, and that's what helps it have so much energy. Let's hear this in the mix. I'll have it off and I'll turn it on in the mix, and you'll hear how important it is. That's where the dirtiness of this genre comes from in these guitars, I feel. It's almost like you're doing something wrong, but you're not. And then Saturn 2, this will just be some tube saturation here, very subtle, 15%. Again, bit of vibe, stop things from poking out, helps them sit, like the same things you would use saturation for. So let's hear this off and on again in solo first, so you can hear what it's doing. Very subtle, it's just a tiny bit of shape to the sound, just helps it fit in with everything else. Okay, so you'll see here for the guitar verse that we have pretty much the same mix settings here. This would have been recorded with the bridge pickup of the guitar. I wanted it to sound smaller and darker than the choruses, so when the choruses hit, the song opened up. This song definitely needed contrast between the verse and the choruses. This was a great way to do that without automating anything like that. You could literally just write it into the song as such, or when you were recording it, have that kind of thing in mind. I'll often do this where there may be a quick pre-chorus before a chorus hits, where there's a bit of guitar. I'll record it on a different pickup or a different guitar just to give it that kind of contrast. So everything here will be the same apart from this last EQ here, where I'm darkening it so that it's smaller, so when the chorus guitars hit, it's a big contrast, big part of the song. Okay, so this guitar octave, this will be different. So what I've done here, as you can see, there's a doubler plug-in before the amp. So I took the mono DI that we've got here, put it through a doubler plug-in to give it width and thickness. I would have experimented, as you can see here, I've experimented with using a delay plug-in after the amp, but turned it off, didn't like it. I've probably was experimenting and found that putting a doubler on the DI before it went into a stereo guitar plug-in, that would have sounded best. The only actual bit of mixing we've got going on here is this Pro Q3. Taking out the low end, this is a lead part, so you don't need that. Dealing with some harshness, being a lead part, the harshness would have been a bit more exaggerated. That's why I didn't need to do it with the rhythm guitars, but this one I would have done. So let's hear that EQ off and on again. So obviously way thinner, but you don't need all that. It doesn't need to be a full spectrum guitar. This is a lead part. Let's hear it in context of the mix off and on. So I'll have it off and I'll turn it on. See, thinning it out really lets it sit where it's supposed to sit. When it had all of the low end stuff, it was getting a bit murky. It was throwing off the mix a bit too much. You thin it out and it really just sits in place. Oh, and I should mention there's a shelf here. these cuts, when you pull out the nastiness, you'll find your guitars get darker. So then you can just add a quick shelf just to bring that back, but obviously still keep these reductions in the pain frequencies. Okay, guitar leads. So we're back to the chorus then. So yeah, like I said before, if you want to stay to the end of the video, I will show you how I actually got this tone, because this is printed down. All I'm doing is using Soothe to tame the harshness. Yeah, mostly sort of 4-5K area. Such a great plugin, Soothe, because it works wonders for, you can really push lead guitars and then take away the nastiness with Soothe. It works really well. Okay, I'll play it with Soothe off and then we'll turn it on. It's kind of hard to hear at first, but when you start picking out what it's doing, you realize how important it is. All that will just start to build up, especially here with these Guitar FX sends as well. So let's see what we've got going on here. I'll turn these on and we'll see how the lead is transformed. Yeah, that's a long delay tail right there. But that just changes the lead riff so much. That sounds so good. I love delays. So first up, we got the Guitar FX Send here, which is a CLA Guitars plugin. Fantastic plugin. Everything over here is turned off except for the reverb, so that's coming from this plugin here, set to Arena. And then you've got some stereo wideness happening here. So let's hear what this is actually responsible for. I'll turn this off and on. Yeah, so a bit of reverb, a bit of wideness, and then Soothe, the same Soothe, I'm guessing, yeah, to stop those frequencies from building as you've got all these sends happening. And then you've got a stereo delay here. This is the Manny M delay, or the Manny Marroquin delay from Waves. This is a great plugin. I use this on vocals as well, so you'll see that in the mixing vocals video, which is coming up later on in this mixing emo series. So quarter note delays, pretty much, yeah, everything's the same left and right. Completely wet because this is parallel. And high pass up to 260, I think that says. And then, yeah, a bit of doubler happening. So let's hear this. I mean, this is doing most of that wall of guitars sort of sound that you heard. And this is obviously responsible for the long old delay tail too. So I'll play it with it off and I'll bring it in. Yeah, I'm a sucker for delays. Love me some delays. So this is what that lead with those FX sounds like in the mix. And there's that delay tail. Yeah, cool, man. I like that. So that is it for the actual guitar mix settings. As promised, if you did stay this long, thank you. And we will go through how I actually got the guitar tones and what I used. So rhythm guitars. These are stereo. So they are double tracks, clean DIs. Use an Evertune guitar because, man, when you hear out of tune DIs in songs, you will never be able to unhear it. And it's something that really sets pros out from the amateurs, is that, you know, sometimes I'll get songs to mix and the guitars sound fine through the amp, but I can tell now, and then when the amp's off, you can hear that the DI is out of tune. Big tip, big tip. Check your guitars when you're recording them. Retune them as much as you can between takes, but check them with just the DI. Make sure they sound in tune just with the DI, because the amp's going to mask that stuff. Another big tip, use a tuning reference. Something like a MIDI bass, just so that you know that your guitar is in tune with the context of the whole world and not just yourself and your other guitar takes. I actually did a video on this, which I'll link in the description, about 2 tips that can fix your guitar tones, because it's such an important thing. It got a bit of hate, quite a lot of dislikes, but I think it's because people don't want to acknowledge that sometimes the most important things to do with guitars is to get it right at the source, and the tuning is such an important part of that. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, so Archetype Nolly, one of the best plugins for amp sims for guitars. So the 5150 head I'm using here, and actually, so in this music I always have to make a decision whether I want like a 5150 more extreme, pushing it towards the metal kind of guitar range, or going with like a Marshall more mid-rangey pop punk sound. the good thing about this plugin is it actually has both. One of the heads is, I believe, a Marshall. It's the white one. Yeah, it's this one here. This is sort of like a more of a pop punky kind of sound. So I'll try them both. With this one, it's a bit more of a slower. We've got some palm mutes going on, so I think this one definitely suited this better. Have a look at the actual settings. So low, cranked it all the way. I heard Nolly himself say on a video that's the low on a guitar amp is basically just a high pass filter. So get all the lows through that you want, deal with them later on. So that's why it's all the way to 10. Mids, I was always taught to scoop mids. I actually don't like how guitars sound when the mids are too scooped, so I tend to now, for some reason, crank mids. More of an amp sim thing. I think that real amps don't tend to need the mids cranked as much, but whenever I'm using amp sims, I just have to have the mids higher than I normally would. Highs and presence, I'll play with those to get a brightness, but not thin harshness, because like you saw earlier, my brightness will come from a plug-in after the amp. I don't think brightness sounds that nice from the amp itself. So you'll see here that the cab is off. I'm actually using a cabinet impulse response from, I think, JST Conquer All pack. Oh yeah, and I should see here you've got a this green pedal is of course a Tube Screamer emulation. Drive is down, tone is slightly bright. And that will clean up your low mids, which is why you'll always see that being used in these genres before the amp. Okay, so what I'm using here is the NAD IR from STL Tones, which is free. It's just an IR loader, an impulse response loader. And I am using here, this is an SM7B through an API preamp. Yeah, this is from the JST Conquer All pack. Not expensive, and you get so many cabinet impulse responses that you can do just flick through loads until you get the sort of sound you're after. So this is the one I'm using here, which is obviously, like with the mixing, would have given me a tone that was brighter than I would have been used to, and would naturally choose, which is what I was going for, and actually it's what I always try to do now, because it definitely helps my guitar tones. So my advice would be, if you do struggle with, like I do, where your guitar sound a bit too soft, is to definitely try and be brighter than you normally would think. Okay, so this is how I made the guitar lead tone. Like with the octave, I've straight onto the clean DI. I've put a waves doubler again. Really like what this does to mono leads, especially like in this one where it just sounded better to be a wide sound. Yes, you could double track the lead, but I don't think it has the same sort of effect. Doing it this way just sort of makes it sound more like a squishy, thick lead. And I've used Tone Forge Ben Bruce here from JST, Joey Sturgis Tones. Let's have a look what we've got going on here. So quite a lot of gain, bass up pretty high. Remember, this is a lead, so I would be turning these, getting some brightness out of it. Cabinet with the condenser mic that comes with the JST cabinet, nothing on the FX, and then just rolling off the low end here with this EQ. Oh, and limiting leads. Limiting your leads is a good idea sometimes, most of the time actually, or compressing them, but getting them super even. This is quite a magic limiter as well. I don't know what it is about the limiter in the Tone Forge plugins, but they just sound really good. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching to the end. And like I said earlier, if you make music like this and you want me to give it a mix, head over to terrybeckleyrecording.com and contact me through the contact page, or email me directly at contact@terrybeckleyrecording.com. Both the email address and the link will be in the description. Next up, we will be going through vocals. That will be a big one. I might even split into two parts because there's quite a lot of vocals to this song. So make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss that. After the vocals, we'll do clean vocals, screen vocals. We'll do all the FX Sends tracks that I haven't already covered. And finally, we go on to mastering. So subscribe. Make sure you don't miss those videos. And I will see you at the next one.